Hello, welcome to the Writing Gals. Tonight we're going to be talking about how to monitor or figure out your level of, what do we say, intimacy, of steam in your clean romance. There's been a lot of discussion about it on our Facebook page, so we decided we were going to kind of go into more detail on that tonight. But first, we wanted to check in on what everybody is doing, and we decided tonight we were going to go ahead and not just talk about what we currently have going on, surprise, Victorine, if you didn't hear this, but we're going to touch base on the first quarter of our year and how we think the first quarter is gone and what we're projecting and making goals for the rest of the year. So, Amy, why don't you go ahead and lead us off there?
Okay, well, I was just looking over at my goals and trying to figure out what I've accomplished. And I feel like in the beginning of the year, it's pretty, I don't know, it's kind of hard. You've got a lot of goals, a lot of like irons in the fire that you're trying to figure out. And so I am accomplishing one of my goals. I'm halfway to one of my goals, which was write a Braxton Brothers series. So I'm 2.5 books into that. So I'm projected to finish that series, a 5-book series. And I've not started my prep school series. And I think I'm pretty well. I'm probably not going to hit my money goal for that just from books, but I'm holding pretty steady with my income, which I'm enjoying. But I'm ready to start kicking things up a notch next month when I start rapidly releasing books. I have not hit the USA Today's bestseller list. I do not have 10,000 newsletter subscribers. I'm getting closer though, so that's positive. And I have started a new rules book. So I'm kind of chipping away at every one of those goals slowly but surely. But I'm really grateful looking at my goals that I still have it's April, so almost May. So I have still have 7 months left to finish these goals. So that's not so scary to have to face something like that. So, but I'm doing pretty well. I didn't release any books in April because I want to start stockpiling and always be a book ahead of what I'm releasing. So I will have the book written. Well, I want to have the first 2 books written before I start releasing the first book, so that I always have a book launching while I'm writing my other books. So hopefully my holding off launching a book will pay off, and I will start seeing some more return for my investment in terms of pushing hard on one book so that I can get that read through, and that I can reach those readers and suck them in and not let them go, because I'm an axe murderer or something. Never gonna let you go.
I'm about to start singing the line from the song, but I'm going to move on to Judy before I do that.
Oh, did you say me? I didn't hear.
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay. So for me, for my goals, I had planned to write 4 books this year, I think. And so far I've written 1 and I've gotten it published. So I guess thinking through the months of the year, that might be kind of on track. I was really slow on that first one though. So I'm hoping I can speed things up a little bit. And that was pretty much my only goal, right? 4 books. And of course, I always want to increase my income, and I'm hoping that those will help me do that. And then also just for this week, I have been working on my reader magnet, and I'm almost done with that. So that was another goal of mine, to get one of those up finally. And I'm hoping to send it to my editor next week, and then I'll have accomplished that goal. So I guess I'm on track, kind of. I might need to set more goals. I don't know, but that's where I am.
Sounds good to me. I was just thinking, we're not actually in the first quarter, we're in the first third of the year, right? Ah, well, first third of the year. I'm a writer, not a mathematician. Okay, Victorine, how about you?
All right, so my main goal for the whole year was to not totally screw up the Sweetwater High series by not finishing my book in time. So I'm almost done with that one, and it doesn't have to be all the way done until beginning of June. And that's when it just goes up to pre-order. So I feel really confident that it'll be all done, and I'm not going to totally let everybody down by not publishing it on time. So my big goal is almost complete. So I'm super happy about that. But my other goal was more in line with what Judy wants, is I want to publish 4 books this year. And I published the first one in my Rockford High series. And then the second one will be the Sweetwater book. And then I've got 2 more Rockford High books planned that I hope to write and publish. So I'm on track to get my goals all done. So I'm super happy about that.
All right. So I had a crazy goal to publish a book a month this year. And I have actually, well, I kind of cheated in January because I did a box set. But then I technically am publishing 2 books in April because my Sweetwater book goes live on the 30th in April. So I'm at 4 new books and 5 release titles for 2019. So I'm pretty good with that. And my income, even though I think we all saw kind of a dip, a hard month across the market in March. February was kind of tough, and March seemed to be even more of a struggle. But I feel like things are looking up with the industry. I think some of the kind of difficulties are smoothing themselves out. And I'm seeing my books launching better like they did in days past when the market was well. So I'm hopeful about the rest of the year and looking forward to the rest of the year. I'm actually going to be attempting to release every 3 weeks something until September. And I am too scared to look beyond September. So that includes a Regency and a whole young adult series that I'm planning to do this summer called Summer of First Kisses. My Sweetwater has to be uploaded by noon tomorrow, so it doesn't miss its pre-order deadline, which hopefully is going to happen. I've got everything back from my proofreaders. I just have to finish formatting and get it up. So I'm pretty confident, and I am having a record month this month, actually. So I have already beaten my highest ever month, and I still have, what is today? It's today the 25th. I don't even know. So I still have, some days left this month. So I'm excited. Yay. After February, March, I did not expect this month to go so well, but I did get a book bub, had another promotion in the middle of the month, and like I said, I'll have had 2 releases this month. So apparently that's a good recipe for a record month. So anyway, we just wanted to touch base on what we had going on and where we wanted to go, and I think that there is lots of room for optimism across all of publishing, and especially if you are writing in the clean and wholesome market. And before we get started with our questions tonight, we actually wanted to bring up that the K-Lytics report for Clean and Wholesome has been put out, and we recommend that you all go check it out. If you can, if you're interested in having a closer look at at our category, especially if you haven't read one of the reports before, you can go to the Writing Gals website, thewritinggals.com, right? And find a link there to the K-Lytics report, and you will see a lot of familiar names on the report, and you'll get to see what's trending as far as tropes, what covers are performing well. You can get a list of every one of the 100 top bestsellers in the category, and get to have easy links to author pages, to book pages, to see the blurbs and the taglines and keywords and all that sort of stuff. So it's just like a whole lot of work that's been done for you. We always recommend, if you want to write to market, that you go and study those things anyway. And the people at K-Lytics have just put it all together for you. And for $37, you have access to anything you can ask for. It's a little bit tricky because it is, especially the bestsellers, it's a snapshot of one day, what the bestsellers were on the day that they took the snapshot. And so I would recommend using it more as like a guide of not necessarily like, oh, this person is the 7th bestseller all the time across the category ever, because it's like that one day where things ranked. And I think kind of there's some math involved because they pull all your titles. And I think that at the time they did it, I had 10 books in the top 100 when they did that, which was a whole lot of me working on series and doing promos and pulling everything up. So it just kind of happened to all combine. And so I think that they do look broadly a little bit, but that bestseller list is for that day. So just use it as a guide to see, okay, what is selling well? What are they doing? How did they get there? What promotions might they have been running? And just use it for the information that you can get, and not to compare yourself to other people or to feel bad about where you were or weren't. Just, to keep that in mind, because I've seen a lot of authors celebrating their success on this report, and they 100% deserve it. And I've also seen people feeling bad, and I really don't think that they need to feel bad at all, because we know those bestseller lists change and turn over constantly. So, all right, that's the big K-lytic spill for tonight. Now we're going to get to some fun questions. So we have seen on our Facebook group a lot of people wanting to know what is okay and clean and wholesome. They want to know about steam levels. They want to know about language. They want to know about violence. And it's really, really hard to kind of just sum up the category. So do you guys think, should I show the graphic right now? We'll see if we can refer to it a little bit. I feel like I'm just talking and everybody's just, I'm seeing all these like smiling heads and nodding.
You're doing a great job. So
it's like the
going.
Michelle show. And I'm not meaning for it to be. Oh, people are saying happy birthday to people over here. Happy birthday, Jody. Okay, so I'm going to screen share really quick and show you an infographic that I created and got everybody's feedback on. So we decided that this was according to all we know. Hi, Judy. We all get to see how my computer is just being silly with me right now. Okay, there we go. Hopefully this is going to pull it up. That we wanted to kind of put everything together in an easy to way understandable infographic. So came up with this. So this is a diagram showing the three
Michelle,
different
I don't think you're screen sharing.
I was. It says screen share right there.
I didn't see it. I just see your face.
Maybe you're sharing the wrong window. Possibly.
Okay, here, maybe if I go ahead. Can you see it now?
Yeah, now you can see it.
Okay. So so there's 3 levels, just because it seemed to be the easiest way to break it down. And every box is nested within the other ones because, for example, the second level, everything in the first level is still okay for the second level. And everything in 1 and 2 is okay in the third level. So they're nested that way. So if you want to be able to have this graphic and study it at length, you can find it on the Writing Gals website. And you can pin it there to your pin board. You can save it. Oh, hello. And that way you can get to look at it more and more. But if you see in level 1, it's basically where there is very, very sort of innocent type touching. There's low heat, not a lot of steam. And the fade to black only happens if people are married. I'm still screen sharing it to get all my notifications. So it's really, really more on the innocent level. And I would say that the wholesome and clean and wholesome is definitely a big part of the level 1. And then with level 2, it gets steamier, but you still really have to hold back. You have to be, keep your descriptive really information really tame and light and not go into details. And level 3 definitely gets closer and closer to the steamy level. So we're going to kind of just base all of our comments tonight on that. And as we go through the questions, if you want to be able to refer to what we might be talking about, then maybe you could pull up that graphic in another window or on your phone or something so that you can refer back to it and understand what we're talking about. But Okay, so I'm going to go to the first question that we asked, that we got back from our Facebook group. And the first question is from Mayra, who's asked, what heat level does fade into black belong?
Well, I think that question, it matters a lot what happens before it. So you could have a fade to black and a clean and wholesome if there's not a lot of the super touchy clothes come off type of stuff at the beginning. So I would say it'd definitely be a level 3. And then depending on how you're describing things, it could get to a level beyond clean and wholesome. And it could go into the spicy. It's all about the level of arousal I think your reader ends up having. And so if it's super intense, then I would probably say because you're playing a little bit with fire, where you're like, how much is too much and how much can my reader handle before they're like, no, I'm going to close the book. So there are some people who will definitely like anything beyond hand holding and like kisses. It's going to be too much for them. But so you're just going to have to see where your comfort level is. But I would definitely say if there's a lot of stuff going on beforehand, it's probably going to be in spicy.
Yeah, so I put fade to black if married and clean and wholesome level 1, just because I think you can write it that way. There are a lot of very, very squeaky clean, romances where the couple is married, especially I see this in historicals with the marriage of convenience or some other trope like that, where they're married and there is very, very little that happens before it fades to black. Where it seems just very, very innocent, and it's even left up to the reader's imagination to decide if that's what happened or if that's not what happened. So there's a way to do it at the very, very, most innocent, or not innocent. What's the word I'm looking for? Like non-steamy,
Clean and
the
wholesome
sweetest.
level.
Yeah, and that's kind of a difference I wanted to point out. It's called clean and wholesome as a category, and I think that clean and wholesome mean 2 different things, and they speak to 2 different readers. So there are readers who just, for whatever reason, just would prefer not to read, about certain things in their book. It might be language, it might be sensuality or sexual content. They just don't want it. And then there's people who have religious feelings about it, or people who have very strong convictions about what content they want, and they might lean more towards the wholesome side, and they might be looking for different things in their books. And so I'd say for the wholesome crowd, you can still write the fade to black, but you have to be very careful how you do it. The more sensuality, the more innuendo, the more heightened all the sexual tension gets right before you end the scene, the further you're moving it towards steamy, towards that line where you might be diminishing the people who are going to be comfortable with reading it.
Yeah, and I think that just keeping to what you have in these different levels, just keeping those as your, as far as you're going to take it before you go to the closed door, then that's a great way to kind of make sure you're still keeping it where you want it to be.
Exactly. I totally agree. Okay, so unless anybody has anything else they want to say, Megan wants to know, is clean and wholesome basically just kisses, or if the couple does do it, the door is shut, nothing further is explained, but how far can that be taken? So it's kind of the same question. She's specifically asking questions like, can the guy's shirt come off and the belt and then shut the door? Where would you say the line is crossed?
I'd say probably no to the belt. Sounds exciting. And then I think maybe the shirt, maybe. I know Amy has taken a shirt off during a kissing scene, so I think that's probably okay. Just depends on.
Yeah, but I think Amy worked it for a very specific plot point too, right? Yeah. That it wasn't just the shirt was coming off because they were heading in those directions. She had a specific thing that was happening because of that, and that's kind of the thing, right? Like,
just depends how lustful the shirt removal is.
Yes. How lustful. A lustful shit removal. We might need to.
Well, and I think it comes down to how many readers are you trying to catch? So, like, if it's absolutely necessary that his belt comes off for whatever reason, maybe it's a magical belt and is slowly suffocating him. So it literally has to come off or he will die. You have to start thinking, like, you want to think broader terms. You want to think more people to catch. If you're trying to write clean and wholesome, I mean, I'm all for pushing boundaries, but you just want to be careful that you're not pushing them too far. And, you know, if you don't, okay, let's say his shirt comes off, but his belt doesn't. Therefore, you will catch those extra 5,000 readers that wouldn't have read it otherwise. Is it worth it to you to not have the belt come off and therefore catch 5,000 more readers? Or not only capture 5,000 more readers, but have 5,000 more readers continue on to your other books, because we want to create lifelong readers. So, you know, there might be a person who will finish your book, then close it and say, I probably won't ever read that one, a book from that author again. So you just have to play it careful, because the more you go to that spectrum of, you know, pushing towards spicy, the more people you'll lose. And you don't want to lose any readers. You want to take them all in. Now, I mean, there's going to be some people who are very like hardcore Christian. I want Bible verses in my book. They'll probably never read yours, but there's a very wide gambit of readers, and their, you know, what am I thinking of? Tolerance level is going to vary, but you kind of want to find that median or that mean. What is it? The one that comes to the top, the most underneath the bell curve.
Again, you're talking
statistician here. You want to hit those people. And if that means don't have his shirt off, don't have his belt off, and that it's sweet kisses and all those things, and then it fades to black, and then the next morning they wake up together, but still then you're kind of playing with themes and stuff that not necessarily
they're not wholesome themes, and so you're going to alienate a lot of people.
There's going to be a lot of people who are reading clean and wholesome who still think sexual encounter should be had after marriage. So, I mean, you know, and honestly, we talk about, you know, you're building up steam, and then you give your reader like that valve, just be like, shh, and it's like, shh, and it's all coming out, you know, and then all of a sudden, where's your steam? Unless you have the next day and they wake up and they're just completely guilt-ridden for what they did, you know, that sexual tension that makes romance readers read has now kind of fizzled out. So you have to really decide if that's exactly what you want to do. In terms of, since we can't do the hurrah, which is the big, you know, sex scene, like really where are you building up to from after you've written the sex scene?
Also,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, you also are making a promise to the reader with every single thing you put in your book, right? And so you don't want to make that promise to the reader that something is coming that's not. So I would be very careful with, you know, what you put in before you close the door. You really need very little for the reader to understand what's going on. So I would just be careful with what promises you're making to your reader.
Yeah, I would even say that any fade to black scene is almost, there would be very few instances that I would ever use that. Pretty much the only time I've ever used a fade to black has been in an epilogue at the end of a book after they've been married. Because at that point, I've taken the reader through the journey I wanted to take them, and I wanted to leave them with this happy little glimpse of the married life that they've created for themselves. I think that having a fade to black scene early in a book or at midpoint is going to be a really difficult thing to tackle in a romance. Now, if you're writing women's fiction and it's not about the romantic arc, then you can write clean and wholesome romantic fiction. But we're talking about romance here. Okay, and so the fade to black thing definitely changes the pacing and the buildup of the conflict. So use it very sparingly and carefully. And I would also say, I think that the closer you go to that steamy edge, like Amy has been addressing, you know, the smaller your market is going to get. You're going to find yourself in no man's land in a way, because people are coming to clean and wholesome because they're looking for something that meets a certain criteria. They can go and read steamy if they want to go and read steamy. If they're here, it's, you know, for a reason. And there are some crossover readers that are perfectly happy to read both and would be fine with whatever you would do. But that's a small margin of people. Okay. And so I would say that, you can push that boundary and see how far you can take it. But, I really, really will promise you that even getting into the level 3 that we've outlined is taking it way too far for most clean and wholesome readers. I put it there because I know it exists, and I know that authors in clean and wholesome write at that level, and that they have found an audience there. But I really think it's a smaller audience than they would have if they moved back from some of their steamy elements that they add. So it's really what you need to decide as an author. Is this important to my plot? Is it important to me as an author to put in there? Or is it something that I could leave out and increase my market share? So at that point, I think it becomes a business decision as much as anything else. Okay, so Courtney wants to know, I know you're probably referring to romantic boundaries and heat level, but would you mind touching on language and violence too? That could be a whole separate video, but just because I'm curious. I didn't include violence and language in the graphic because I don't think that it's correlated directly. As far as like in level 1, you can have this and this, but none of this, right? I think that you could have a level 2 with no violence and no language. You can have a level 3 with no language and no violence, but it's still a level 3. You can have a level 1 that if you add in, a rape scene, and a lot of vulgar language and curse words, then, it's not going to be level 1 anymore. I think that there's separate factors, separate entities that you have to consider that are definitely going to impact the reader in completely different ways. So the intimacy is what it is. The steam level thing is what it is. I wouldn't say that there is a definitive list of vulgar words or cuss words or swearing words or blasphemous words that everybody's going to agree on. Partially because everything is different by region, by culture, by world, what words are offensive where, what they mean in different places, and then there's also the matter of people's personal moral beliefs and directions. And while that, is the same with steam levels are easier to define in a lot of ways. I would say that your best bet is to not put anything in that's going to offend anybody if you want to be in clean and wholesome. If you want to be a clean and wholesome writer, don't put in very graphic, violent scenes that especially I feel are of a sexual nature, sexual violence against anybody, or abusive, violence. There is room for, especially in romantic suspense, for there to be fight scenes, even for there to be blood and some broken bones or that kind of thing. But I think in clean and wholesome, anything that has happened violently sexual or abusive scene needs to be off screen. It needs to be in the past. It needs to be something that's referred to as background and not shown on the page, because that's too much for the readers. As far as language,
it could be like cut scene where it starts and then
I think it's too intense for most things. I'm talking about, if I was to say, if two guys got in a rumble, that's different than if a guy starts to beat up his girlfriend, if you know what I mean.
Well, and I think,
go ahead.
I think once you move into heavier issues, that becomes less of a romance and more of a women's fiction, where she's conquering whatever issues she's getting over with a romantic subplot. The reason why we say, yes, you can have heavy issues in your book, but don't let that take over. What's really your readers are coming to is that it's historical, or not historical, it's clean and wholesome romance. So that has to be the forefront of your mind. And you cannot make the mountain she has to get over so unsurmountable that she can't do that with a lot of off-screen from him time. And it's not that I say don't write social issues, don't write people getting over abuse. I think those are very important, but those are very important in different genres, and it's not really so much in clean and wholesome, where they have to deal with it right now. If it's in the past, far enough that they have been able to heal to the point where they meet the person, but they're not completely healed, and meeting the person and having this journey with them helps complete them, that's totally fine. But if somebody who has gone through some sort of trauma, whether it be a rape or a murder or death, that's too close, there's just too much personal healing that has to happen before they can even become a person that they can have a relationship with. And that's where also, kind of figuring out who your character is. So like in Forgiving the Billionaire, he is this guilt that he's been carrying for months about his daughter's death. And you have to make sure that that guilt is accomplished before he can fully fall in love with this girl. And so there are some parts where he has to come to grips with what had happened, which might have taken the story a little bit off the romantic trail. So you don't want to have somebody who's like this broken person, right? And all of a sudden and all of a sudden in chapter 3, they're making out with the other character. You're like, wait a minute, no. They have to overcome whatever emotional baggage they have. So make sure that emotional baggage is not so unsurmountable that they can't do it in the short time that you have to tell the story.
Yeah. And I would even say for so many readers, Clean and Wholesome is a safe harbor.
Right.
It's where they go to find stories that they know they can depend on to give them a happy feeling, and that aren't going to trigger them, that aren't going to cause them a lot of stress or trauma, which can happen in those kinds of stories. We have to remember that there are so many experiences that people have gone through in their real lives, and they don't want to have to relive that every time they pick up a book. And so Clean and Wholesome is almost a promise that this is where you can come and find stories that are going to bring joy and happiness in your life, and not something that's going to trigger these really horrible, awful things. So I think authors need to just be very careful with how they approach such sensitive and potentially traumatizing matters for their readers.
A good place to look if you're starting to think you want to write in Clean and Wholesome, reviewers are really good. You go to any book that's in Clean and Wholesome and go down to the reviews. Reviewers will pick out topics, they'll pick out swear words, they'll pick out they'll rank your book on a level of steaminess, and this will give you an idea of what readers are looking for in that thing. They'll say swear words and they'll say too but minor, and like they know they will like write it down, or like violence or nothing but more than kissing. They're very good. Every book I have one or two people who have broken down what is inside of my book. So if you're looking like, how sensitive is a reader really going to be, go look, because those reviewers will tell you what's in there. And if it's important enough to point it out, then you know that they're reading, they're seeing those, they're knowing. You could maybe get away with one or two swear words, and that's about it. After that, then I think you could be labeled as, too much. Yeah. So reviews are really, really good for that kind of information.
And then My Book Cave actually has like a rating system that you can go to. It'll rate your level of profanity, your violence, and everything. It kind of goes through each of those different areas, and then it'll give you like a mild or mild plus, or I haven't had a book go farther than that, so I don't know the names of the other things. But that can be a good way to kind of get an idea of what is acceptable in certain categories.
Yeah, and I think over on My Book Cave, they actually talk about other things such as substance abuse. Is it by a minor? Is it by an adult? Is it by a main character? They go into a lot of other things too that we're not even mentioning tonight. So there's a lot of content issues that you have to think of when you're writing Clean and Wholesome. And, reviewers can tell you what, how you're doing, how you're meeting the market expectations. But I would also say, just because you're not getting bad reviews doesn't mean you're not losing readers. It doesn't mean that readers aren't closing your book and not coming back. It's something you always have to be aware of, that you could be getting some, 5-star reviews from people who have a higher tolerance for those kinds of things. And you could be permanently losing readers from people who don't. And you could be completely okay with that. But if that's something that you're not okay with, then you might want to consider that as you're deciding, the content. So I just was writing for my Sweetwater book, which is called Flirting with the Bad Boy. I found that it is really hard to write a bad boy who doesn't have a potty mouth. And there were so many times that I felt like this character would say something that I knew my readers wouldn't want him to say. And so it was kind of this constant battle with this character to keep his dialogue free. And the thing that you can't do is you can't put in silly words instead of, the swear word, because that would not have worked for his character. And so what did I do? As a writer, I just had to be more clever. I just had to find a better way to express the same thing in a way that didn't feel like I was leaving out what people would expect to be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like
So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, like, in one of my books, I had the bad guy, and he would have sworn, and so I just said he swore or whatever, and I didn't actually say the word.
Yeah, you can do that. Definitely. And I think I did do that. And then there's other ways where you just change how they're saying something. So it increases the intensity and it still matches their character's personality, but it doesn't make it obvious that you're leaving off a swear word. And so it's possible. We are incredible. Our brains are smart and they can figure out ways to not have swearing and curse words. Yes, I know military men swear, and I know firemen and police officers swear, and I know, most people at, in high intensity situations or in, depending on where they live, they might swear more often than other people do. But that doesn't mean as a writer that you can't find a better way to write their dialogue so that your audience is able to, be able to enjoy the story without having to wade through that. I read a book in college about the Vietnam War that is one of my favorite books of all time, but there were so many swear words and vulgarities peppering that book that it was very difficult. It was painful for me to get through in a lot of ways. And it was at that point that I realized, I could have had the same good experience with this book without that. Would it have been as authentic? I don't know. But, when we're writing clean and wholesome, we're writing to a specific audience. We're not writing about Vietnam War stories. So it's a duality. I see people talk about, how do I write about military men without having curse words? I promise you're smart enough to figure that out. Okay. Let's go on, and we're going to read the next question from Laura, which was very similar. I think we actually already talked about it mostly, but she wanted to know, how do you show in detail when your advertising is clean, whether or not there are other issues in your book? So I'll just read a question because it'll make better sense. Can you talk about what other issues you can mention and in what detail if you are advertising as clean abuse and violence? So if you're advertising your book as clean, can you have abuse and violence in detail? And I would say not in detail. So there's that.
Because romance readers are wanting the love. They don't care about the details. But I skim over those parts anyways, so it's okay.
Yeah. And skimming is important. We never want to put anything in that people are going to skim over. Casey, similar question, sort of, taking another step forward. How important is it to put a rating in the About section on Amazon? I've been seeing it around.
Well, I think any kind of forewarning you can give your reader is important. So if you feel, do they read that? Possibly, unless it's like the first line. But if I would not ever suggest putting rating as the first line. But I think using your cover, using models on your cover, titles, the blurb, all those things can be hinted to. That maybe it's not going to be this fluffy Hallmark movie, that there's going to be some actual, deep, hurt or, trauma that they have to get over. So that's definitely another way of doing it. But I would say it doesn't hurt to put a rating on, just to forewarn people. They do that in spicy. They'll say 18 plus or for adult eyes. And you know what? They kind of make it funny. So if you could come up with like a quippy way of writing it, I think that will actually draw readers in than just telling them not to. But I mean, we all base our movies we watch based off the rating of them. So I don't think it would turn a reader off.
Back when I first started publishing, we didn't have a clean and wholesome category, and I would put at the bottom of my book description that it was a clean romance, simply because that was one of the only ways to show that that's what it was back then. And, you know, depending on how your reader finds your book, they might be just doing a general search word and not looking through the clean and wholesome category, and so they might be approaching it from somewhere where they don't know what kind of book it is. I remember having to go and read through reviews and read the first 10% of the book and try and judge whether or not I thought that this was a clean book. And luckily, I think it's getting easier and easier to find those, thanks to the way Amazon has categorized things. But there's a lot you can tell a reader from your branding, from your your cover, from your title, from your book description, where you don't have to necessarily be blatant about it and scream at them that this is a clean book, this is a clean romance. You can get that message across. And especially if you're able to hold true to what the market wants and expects, you're going to win those readers over, and you're going to develop a level of trust with them. And I know that the other ladies here, we've talked about this before, from our people on our, subscriber lists, our fans that reach out to us, reviews that we get. We hear time and time again, like, I'll read anything that she writes because I know I can trust her that she's going to write a clean romance. And that is a relationship that you develop over time with your readers by being trustworthy. Casey wants to know, no, we just did Casey. Sorry, Casey, we already did yours. Rachel, can you touch on how clean romance affects the character's thoughts and the descriptions of their attraction, not just whether there's a sex scene? I think a lot of authors moving down heat levels need to know the difference.
Yeah, so when you're doing clean romance, you can like think more like, have the character be thinking, oh, she looks really pretty today. I like the way her hair is, or I don't know. That was a really bad description. Where in the more spicy, they'll be thinking more like, oh, she's so hot, I want to get her in bed, and I just want to do all these things or whatever. So definitely the way that they're thinking about the other character will share the heat level and where it's going to be going.
Yep, I agree. Again, it's making a promise to the reader, right? So if their thoughts are on that kind of thing, then you're making the promise to the reader that that's going to happen. So yeah, I would just make sure their thoughts are more along the lines of clean thoughts.
Well, and you can also use that description of like, you're not thinking about, body parts, your own personal ones or other people's, and you can, where their hands go, they can think about bringing their hands to that area, but not other places. And then like, not like hardcore thinking, what they're going to do, those kinds of things. If wherever they can touch in that sheet that Michelle made up, they can think about, but other than that, they can't. Or you could just, you could have them start and then they redirect their thoughts. Like, you don't want to be like, I'm this robot and I only think about these things. Guys are going to think certain ways and girls are going to think about other things, and if you felt like, well, that's where my character would do, you could always just bring him back.
Yeah, like I'll have my guys maybe notice how nice her pants look on her or whatever, and then he'll like, oh, gotta bring my eyes up or whatever. So, like, don't think about that.
That's part of the push and pull of romance anyway, is the step forward and then the draw, the retreat back, right? So, I mean, that's a perfect way. If one of them is feeling attracted towards the other, have them retreat because of some emotional resistance or issue or other thing that they're dealing with. Use that as a reason to pull their thoughts back and have them make the effort to turn away before it gets going down that path that we don't want the reader to have to go down anyway. And I would also say you can also be a little bit, vague. You can imply that there is attraction there in a lot of really subtle ways. You don't have to be descriptive about it. In fact, I think it's usually more impactful if it's subtle, And so if you read any of our books, you'll see that there's no lack of steam or tension as far as like, that they're attracted to each other, but we're not being overt about it. Now, there are definitely going to be some instances, and I think we have a question coming up that I'm just going to bring up now since we're having this discussion from Nomi, which I hope I pronounced that right. She says, as an avid reader of sweet romance, I've run across many books lately where the author will mention one character is checking out the other's butt or how the heroine looks in her bikini, etc. Where is the line crossed? And if you include those things in sweet romance, will that earn you bad reviews by clean readers? Or is this the direction things are headed with sweet, since I'm seeing this more and more lately? How popular are the books that advertise sweet with heat or sweet and spicy? And I find this interesting because she's actually one of my ARC readers, so I know she reads my books. There's usually in most of my books one scene where there is some kind of steamy moment where it takes it just a touch further, but I'm always very, very strictly in that level 2 clean. I don't think that people are unaware that a guy could find a girl attractive in a bathing suit, but I'm never descriptive about it. And there's never any talk of arousal or of wanting to take things further or of wishing he could take it off and see what she looked like without it. I mean, like those are all places that you could go that I do not go. And for the most part, I think there may have been one review that I have ever gotten where somebody mentioned that it got, what did she say? She said it was on the steamy side of clean. And I was, but for the most part, my readers just say how clean my book is and that they appreciate that it's clean. So I think that you can go, as long as you're not descriptive and as long as you're not lengthy about it, you can have somebody be attracted to somebody in a certain situation, especially at a certain point in the story. Like I wouldn't do it at the beginning with a stranger. I only do it when they've been moving through all the levels of intimacy and their emotional connection is growing right along with it. And it's right before I get to that black moment where things have to start falling apart, because that is kind of what helps push them towards the decision that they need to make, that they want to try and make things work with this person before everything goes wrong. So what do you guys think about it?
I was going to say, kind of going back to what we were talking about. So like I have played around with my characters kissing on a bed, but I think if you have to decide where your boundaries are going to be pushed. So if you're going to push boundaries with thoughts, then you can't get them into a bed. Why? Because it would feel unrealistic for someone who's been thinking about this person's body part all day long to all of a sudden be laying down in a bed with them, not to go farther than that. So, but if you have it really clean thoughts that you can have them kiss on a bed, but then it feel not so unnatural that they don't make it go any farther. And obviously they kiss on a bed and then they instantly are pulling apart. Like she didn't mean to do that. She shouldn't have kissed him. She gets up and leaves. They always get up and leave. They can't, like, unless I've had them where they're fake married and they sleep in a bed, but they don't really kiss. So you have to kind of say, okay, if I'm going to play with this particular fire, then I can't play with this other fire because it would be unrealistic for me to play with that other fire and not have it actually go. So you kind of have to decide which boundaries you're going to push, because I'm okay with pushing some boundaries. I'm okay with not making it be just this, drudge through, oh, he holds my hand, oh, we kiss, then the book is over. Like, I'm okay with, we're humans. We write about humans and having, they're going to do certain things that, they're going to have certain thoughts. But if you're going to have them have those thoughts, then they can't do other things that you might want to push in, like, to a level 3. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions about this on our feed, so I feel like we'll be addressing it a little bit more. This is a really difficult topic because we know that there is a lot of variance between writers and between readers and in the market. It's a very tricky topic, and that's why we're trying to provide resources to help people. But just remember through all of it, if you can figure out what the core market wants and stick to that, then you're going to be safest. And generally that is, non-descriptive, not a whole lot of steam, and keep it definitely, on the lighter side of the sexual tension compared to where the steamy levels go.
Yeah, and basically I would just study the bestsellers who continually have bestsellers in the clean and wholesome market, because if they are the type that they push the boundaries in one book and they lost a lot of readers, they won't continue to sell well in that genre. So I would just see what they are doing and how far they are taking things and what they're thinking about, and if that's what you enjoy in your reading, then try and do that in your writing. And
at the same time, I was privy to a conversation where people were discussing someone who is very popular in the clean and wholesome who gets up to the bestseller status all the time, whose books have gotten progressively steamier as they've gone on, and that was becoming a concern to these readers. And they were like, if it keeps going in this direction, I don't know that I can keep reading with her, And so once you've established your relationship and your connection with the readers, even though we all like to kind of test the edges of things or take characters in new places and maybe push the characters based on what their needs are for their character arc, we have to remember that we are definitely impacting the readers and how they view us, and they will tolerate a little bit, but, I don't want my readers to tolerate me. Do you guys want yours to tolerate you? I want them to love me. I want them to automatically click buy when they see my name on a book. I don't want them to be like, oh, I don't know, the last one had me a little bit worried. So that's always what you think about it. Think about it.
Now I want to know who this author is, because I think I want to read them. Because I like my
you already do, Judy.
Clean. Oh, I do? Okay.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, then I think I know who you're talking about then.
Yeah. Okay, so Melanie wants to know which level of heat sells best, because I like my stuff at a 3, but I want to write what the people want. Yes, I don't think that 3 sells the best. It probably does sell, but I don't think it sells the best. I think you're definitely going to be alienating more of the market than you're going to be attracting. So
I'm at a 2.5, so I think that sells pretty good. But
well, and that's the thing. So I think when Judy says 2.5, it means that she's kind of put a toe over in 3 occasionally in a book. It doesn't mean that she's writing a lot of level 3 stuff in her book, or even half of the level 3 stuff in her book.
Yeah, I'm not.
It means that
when you came out with it, I'm like, ooh, lots of ideas here. Lots of things I can try.
So it's one thing to kind of stick your toe over to the other level and like try out like one thing or put like one thing, and to like just add half of those elements in your book. So I think 2.5 is probably a little bit too high.
2.1. I'm
2.1. Yeah. I think that in historical romance, I think level 1 sells really well and the best probably. I feel like in mail order brides, a lot of them probably are level 1, but I know there's some level 2s with a lot of fade to blacks in mail order brides. I think that in Amish romances, you pretty much have to be a level 1. So, it can really become down to your niche category. What are you writing within Clean and Wholesome? Because Amazon hasn't broken it out a whole lot. We have a young adult Clean and Wholesome now, but we don't have a historical Clean and Wholesome. We don't have a, contemporary Clean and Wholesome. We just have this one category where, we even have some paranormal books and some fantasy books and, all these different things. And so there's a big range of different kinds of books in here. And you got to know your people and the kind of books you're writing when you're assigning a heat level, because it would be really weird, I think, to do an Amish romance at a level 3 steam level. And I think if you did that, you would pretty much alienate the majority of people who picked up your books.
And your characters would be shunned by their people, probably.
They would have a hard time when it came to. It depends on if they decided to, join the religion or not officially.
Yeah.
Well,
they have that bundling, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is true. So, but just know what you're writing and what people expect there. When I write Regency, my heat level is definitely going to be different than when I'm writing contemporary. So, in fact, I think that my Regencies have been a smidge on the steamy side for historicals because they did do more than hold hands. They did kiss. I had a couple of good kisses, and so that is on the steamy side for historical, or for Regency specifically, I should say. Okay, I think one last question here. Susanna wants to know how descriptive in terms of sensuality can the kiss be and still be clean and wholesome? She thinks the kiss is super important, but doesn't want to overstep the boundaries. And she talks about the military language, which we already got into. So if you look at the chart that I made, I actually talk about the description of kisses and the kinds of kisses you can have in each level. So in the first level, you can have, sort of a very, very non-descriptive kiss, very chaste. It might even say, and they kissed, instead of going into a lot of description there. In level 2, it can get longer, but you still got to hold back on that description a lot. Most of your description needs to be about the emotions that they're feeling and, what's going on between them. Not necessarily a play-by-play of how the kiss is going. I mean, you can do some of them, but you do not want to be descriptive. You don't want to mention tongues a whole lot. I mean, that's kind of where, you might be putting it over into level 3 if you start describing the tongue. And really, is it that attractive of a thing to describe anyway?
I've tried putting it in. Oh, I was going to say the same thing I said in a previous video. I tried putting that in before, then I had to take it out. Okay.
It's actually a really silly and kind of gross sounding thing to try and describe, isn't it? But
I can't say it differently. So there you go.
So there's ways to describe it in subtle, vague terms where smart readers know what you're talking about because we've kissed, and you don't have to beat the reader over the head with what they're doing. You can figure it out. If you start being really descriptive, you are definitely moving up to the next level, and it can get, a lot steamier. It can run away with you really quickly. So I like to avoid that in my writing. So I would think a good guideline for clean and wholesome to be safe is to not have descriptive kisses. Focus on the emotion. I would say that is generally the safe bet is to focus on emotion in clean and wholesome.
Yeah, I agree. And you can imply just a little bit more than actual description, because I do that a little bit in mine. Another good thing is just to read some kisses that are in the best-selling books and see what other authors are doing. That's a good way to improve your writing anyway. Sorry, didn't have a ton to say.
Do we have any questions on the live feed tonight? Oh, Victorine was doing that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but then her internet wasn't working.
Oh, my internet is really bad right now.
So she said, question, is Bella Andre's Sullivan series and Marie Force's Cassette Island series considered clean romance? Well, I'm not really sure. I haven't read those books, so I wouldn't know. I would say a lot of people end up in clean and wholesome that are not clean and wholesome. And it's upsetting because it's like you have a million other categories you can dominate. Don't dominate ours. Or it's clean and wholesome, but it's not romance. That's frustrating as well because it's like, no, you don't belong in here. So I think sometimes going off of what category they put themselves in is not always the most wise. That's where if you're really worried, like what Michelle did at the back before of these categories, she would read reviews. And if you put your book in clean and wholesome and it's not, people will people will write reviews about why is this in Clean and Wholesome? It shouldn't be there. Or the other way, if I tried to put my book in erotica, I would get a lot of bad reviews being like, this isn't erotica. Why is it in here? So you want to be careful about that. I hesitate to say yes or no because I haven't read those books. I don't know.
I think Bella Andre is not Clean and Wholesome. She may actually write under a Clean and Wholesome name, a pen name for the Clean and Wholesome market, but I think the Bella Andre name is not. I don't know the other authors, so I can't say.
And I would say, for the most part, if there's any doubt, they're probably not. Like, if you've read them and you've seen content that makes you wonder, is this Clean and Wholesome? Then it's probably not.
Yeah.
A solid Clean and Wholesome romance is pretty cut and dried and doesn't take a whole lot to figure it out. So others might push some boundaries, but, just picking up a random author, you probably would be able to tell pretty easily if they are or not.
Okay, Danielle asks, how do you convey which level of clean and wholesome you are so you are not surprising readers with a level higher than they expect? I would say it's not so much that you're going to have a reader that's going to close a book or they just won't continue reading. And I'm not saying you should write your books to please everyone, because then you'll never write a book, because not everybody loves the same kind of book. But it's just kind of like casting the wider net. So like there's a woman who was on Self-Publishing Formula, and she writes like very specific like Scottish romance, historical romance set within like a 10-year period of time. It's very, very specific, very niche. And she's doing really well. She had to go out and find her audience though. So that's the difference. So you could go out and find an audience that likes your level of heat, but do you want to put that much effort forward? So if you have and this is where I think covers and facial expressions of the people is very, very important. If you have a cover where there's like light and bright and shiny and they're smiling and they're hugging, but they're not, they're kind of pulled back, body language says so much, opposed to like, I like Victorine's cover for her suspense novel where he's looking at her and she's looking away and there's this tension between the two of them and you can feel like maybe they're in danger or maybe they're not. Those would be more of I think the more passionate ones where people would probably expect a little bit, whether it be more danger or it would be more, spicier in terms of the level 3. So don't underestimate a cover and how well a cover can either sell your book or not sell your book or indicate to people what they have. Do you guys have anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, I would say even in your book description, the words that you use, the kind of tension you refer to, can give a lot of signals, to, the steam level of your book. If you're really worried about it, then yeah, go ahead and tip them off. Like, this book is steamy sweet. I mean, people are going to be like, well, I'm not sure what that means, but maybe it's a little on the steamy side, I guess, and they'll try it out and make a determination whether or not it's for them. So it's so hard because we're all just trying to invent terms. Everybody's like, well, let's have ratings, but who monitors ratings? We already have categories that nobody monitors. We already have words that are supposed to mean one thing and people change them to mean other things, like that. Nobody owns the industry. Nobody owns the reader's ability to, define things how they want to define things. So that's one of the things that's interesting in the K-Lytic report is he goes in and he looks at Google searches for different things, and he compares Google searches for erotica and Google searches for sweet romance or clean romance. And I find that interesting, that the readers are the ones who are deciding what we're calling this and what our category is and what our category means. And that's why there's a lot of questions about it, because we're not trying to figure out what we think it should be. We know what our opinions are. I know what I want in a book. I know what I want my books to be. But the question that is really hard to define is what the market wants and what the readers want. And so everything that we're telling you tonight is just like our best advice, our best reading of the market and what we think is, the most solid and defined way to look at it. But, it's a market that's in flux and doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the readers.
I do want to point out, though, that you're going to want to be really, really careful, too, because on the other end, you will have people who read your books, and it could be family members or friends that will read your level 2 clean and wholesome book and will write you scathing emails about how could you write that? How could you be like that? I thought I taught you better. I thought you were cleaner. I thought you were, you know, and you need to learn to ignore those people. Those people are poison in your life. Like, anybody who writes things to you and tells you things like that are people, well, you should, if it's your mom, you can't really not love your mom. But I'm just saying, because that can get in your head and that can change your writing. So, you know, if you feel confident in the level that you're writing, I honestly think there are readers for every level of spicy. Doesn't mean I read them, and I probably won't promote those books, but I believe that there are readers for them. And I would never put anybody down for the level that they felt that they should write in their book. And so none of us should ever write scathing emails to anybody about anything. The best way that you can, you know, we live in a capitalist world, right? So if I don't want somebody, if I don't necessarily morally approve with what they're writing, I just don't buy their books. And that's exactly, but somebody else will. Like the same way somebody who wants more spice is not going to buy my book. So, you know, don't let stuff like that bother you, because even if you keep it as squeaky clean as possible, there are some people who are going to just not be happy with you. And you need to be able to ignore, shut down, and just be like, okay, then don't read my books if it bothers you that much. But there will be people out there, depending on your background, depending on the people in your life, that are going to say stuff like that. And you cannot let that bother you. And you cannot let that stunt your creativity, because then you'll start questioning yourself, you know, like, oh, am I a good person then if I'm writing books like this?
You touched on something that I think is a very important point that we have not yet made, and that is promoting with other authors in your category. Because I know there have been times that people have requested to do a newsletter swap with me, and something about their cover made me cautious. And so I have bought their book and I have looked through their book, and you can use the search function in a Kindle book to look for certain words. And so as soon as I search for swear words and found swear words, or search for certain bodily descriptions and found those bodily descriptions, I knew immediately, no, this book is not for my reader. So even though they had fade to black scenes, they went so far with them that I knew, okay, this is not going to work for my readers. I mean, so I'm not going to promote that author. So the more mainstream you stay within the clean and wholesome category, the more opportunities you're going to have to, you know, be able to swap newsletters and have other authors promote your work, because they are very protective. We are all very protective of our audience, of our fans, and we are not going to push anything towards them that we know that they're not going to like. So just something else to keep in mind there. I think we got like another question, right?
It was just someone asking the difference between sweet and clean and wholesome.
Another thing for the K-Lytics guy that I have to give him a thumbs up, because he went pretty far into the sweet and clean issue. So go and read what he said. But basically, sweet used to mean a certain thing, and it's kind of being taken over by steamy authors who like to say that their books are sweet, and they may be very, very sweet, and who am I to say whether they're sweet or not sweet? But as soon as you start having erotica books that are tagging their books or describing their books as sweet romance, then it loses the meaning for clean and wholesome. Does that make sense? So like they've taken a word that used to mean this thing, and they've expanded it to the point where it no longer means what it used to. So I still think my books are sweet romances. We describe ourselves as sweet romance authors, but yeah, now sweet romance is being used actively as descriptions and in promotions and advertising, all the way up to erotica. And so it's very problematic, and clean and wholesome is pretty cut and dried. And there's you know, a lot of discussion within the romance writing community about the use of the word clean. and we don't need to have that discussion here at this time. But again, if you watch the K-Lytics report, he talks about, you know, what readers are looking for, and, you know, it's the description and category used by readers and by our retail distributor. And so that's where we're all at with that. So anything else, or are we done for the night? So we are going to be going to Storymakers Conference in Utah in a couple of weeks. Amy and Victorian are both going to be teaching there, and Judy and I get to just enjoy the conference. So I know a lot of our people are going to be there with us. We're looking forward to seeing you all. Please come and say hi to us, because we want to make sure we get to talk to everybody. And there are crowds of people there. So we'll see some of you in Storymakers in just, what was that, 2 weeks?
Yeah, and we started consultation packages. Victorine and I both have something up on the Writing Gals Facebook group. Michelle and Judy will, as they find the time, create packages for themselves. So if you're looking anywhere from manuscript critiques to brand analysis of ads analysis, marketing analysis, any of those kinds of things, we're each offering different packages, different things that we feel like we could offer other writers. So make sure you join our Facebook group to find out more about that. You get one-on-one attention from one of us, which is pretty cool. And yeah.
And pretty soon, I think we're going to be able to have a fun reveal for a collaborative book that the Writing Gals are working on. So we're going to start publishing a series of nonfiction writing books called The Writing Gals Discuss. And every volume is going to be us discussing, just like we do on here, different aspects of the market and writing. And so we're going to be tackling writing to market in our first book, and we'll have announcements with cover reveals and when the book is going to be published as soon as we have more specifics on that. But you can all start looking forward to it now. I think it's going to be super exciting when we're finally able to complete that project. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun putting it together.
Very cool.
Anything else? Okay, I hope you love the show. Hope it was helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you subscribe, then you'll get notified when we're going live. And I know a lot of you like to try and catch us live. Don't miss an episode, guys. We have decided to move to every other week because of our busy schedules. And so be sure you hit that subscribe so you don't miss one. All right, we're going to say goodnight. Thanks for joining us.